Midnight arrived without ceremony, which was rude, considering how much Kai Verson disliked surprises. He was awake anyway, seated cross-legged on his bed with an outdated translation tablet balanced on one knee, arguing silently with a line of symbols that had been dead for 300 years and still managed to be smug about it. The room lights were dimmed to existential regret, his preferred setting. Somewhere in the building, a pipe knocked twice as if also judging him. "Can you help me?" The voice was calm, polite, female, definitely not coming from the tablet. Kai looked up. There was a woman standing between his desk and the door. She was very solid, very real, and very much not supposed to be there. He stared. She stared back, head tilted slightly, long ears extending past her hair in a way that made his brain attempt several explanations at once and then give up. Blue skin, bare feet on his rug, no weapon, no shoes, no visible means of entry. Kai closed his eyes, counted to 3, and opened them again. She was still there. "This," he said carefully, "is either a hallucination, a prank that required a terrifying amount of effort, or I finally forgot to pay rent, and this is how eviction works now." "I don't know what rent is," she said, considering this, "but I did not intend to frighten you." "You appeared in my room," Kai said, "at midnight." Yes, that was the safest temporal overlap. That sentence alone is doing a lot of damage. She glanced around, taking in the room with focused attention, then looked back at him. "Are you Kai Verson?" Kai sighed. Of course she knew his name. Hallucinations always did. "That depends. Are you here to arrest me, recruit me, or ask me why my last published paper ruined 3 careers including my own?" Her brow creased. "None of those. I am here because you translate languages that are not meant for humans." "Well," he said, "I used to. Now I mostly translate grocery labels and regret." She stepped closer. Not aggressively. Just close enough that Kai became acutely aware of the fact that she was occupying the same physics as he was. "My name is Aelith. My world is collapsing inward. We believe its core will become a singularity within 100 local cycles." Kai stared at her. Then he laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the alternative was screaming. "You're telling me your planet is turning into a black hole and you picked me. I can't even fix my sink." "I observed your work," she said. "Your failure was political, not intellectual." "That might be the nicest thing anyone said to me in 5 years. She relaxed slightly, as if humor were a known but imprecise tool. "You live alone. Observation skills are off the charts tonight." "You are isolated," she corrected. That made the transition safer. Kai gestured weakly at the air between them. "You call this safe. I did not intersect any vital organs. That's the bar now." She hesitated. "I did arrive partially, inside a container of fabric." "My laundry," Kai said flatly. "You teleported into my laundry." "I apologize, it was soft." Despite himself, he snorted. The tension shifted, not gone but dented, like a wall someone had hit with a chair. He stood slowly, keeping his hands visible in the universal gesture of "please don't make this worse." "Okay, Aelith, from the collapsing world. What exactly do you want from the disgraced xenolinguist who got blacklisted for telling a council their sacred archive was badly punctuated?" Her eyes stayed on him. "We have temples, they predate our recorded history. Their language is not spoken, it is structured, recursive, alive in a way our scholars can no longer hear. We need someone who listens differently." Kai felt something cold and electric move through his chest. Not fear, recognition. "You didn't ask any of the big institutions. They refused us," she said simply, "or did not believe us, or asked for ownership." "Yeah," Kai muttered, "that tracks." Silence settled. The pipes knocked again as if impatient. Kai rubbed his face. "If this is real, and I'm not saying it is, I need coffee. Interdimensional crises always sound more reasonable after coffee." "I do not know what that is," Aelith said. "Good," he replied. "That means more for me." He moved past her toward the kitchen alcove, half expecting gravity to give up or reality to blink. Neither did. She turned to follow, ducking slightly under a doorway she hadn't measured correctly. "Your dwelling is small," she observed. "So is my optimism." As the kettle began to hum, Kai glanced back at her, at the impossible calm with which she stood in his ruined little life, ears twitching faintly as if listening to something he couldn't hear. "If I say yes," he said, "whatever this is, it won't be simple." "I did not come for simple," Aelith said. "I came for truth." Kai laughed softly. "That makes two of us," he said, and poured the water, wondering when exactly his life had stopped being quiet. Kai decided that if an alien was going to ask for his help, she could at least survive a background check. He sat at his desk with 3 hollow screens floating at uneven heights, each displaying a different relic of his former career. One showed a lattice of extinct trade glyphs. Another pulsed with probabilistic syntax trees that only made sense if you accepted that grammar could feel offended. The third was blank, waiting. Aelith stood on the opposite side of the room, hands folded behind her back, watching the screens as if they might suddenly bite. "Before we proceed," Kai said, "I need to establish whether you're real." "I have been standing here for 43 minutes, she replied. "If I am not real, I am very committed to the performance." "Hallucinations always are," he said. "It's their one redeeming quality." He flicked his fingers and the blank screen filled with a dense spiral of symbols. The language had never been officially named. It had been abandoned after a research team declared it aggressively uncooperative. Kai smiled faintly. "Tell me what this means." Aelith stepped closer. She didn't rush. She studied the spiral, head tilting, ears angling forward. "This is not a message," she said after a moment. "It is a question pretending to be architecture." Kai blinked once, twice. "That's annoyingly accurate." She glanced at him. "You sound displeased." "I'm thrilled," he said. "I just hate being impressed before caffeine." He changed the projection. This time the symbols fragmented and reassembled, their logic folding in on itself. "And this?" Aelith frowned. "That is a warning or an apology, possibly both. Your species does that as well, I think." Kai laughed despite himself. "We've built entire governments on that principle." The laughter eased something in the room. Not the situation. Nothing could do that. But the pressure of it, like loosening a collar that had been choking him for years. He leaned back in his chair, studying her again, this time with professional interest rather than existential dread. "You didn't stumble across me," he said. "You filtered for something specific." "Yes," Aelith said, "you failed publicly." "Ah," he said, "my proudest feature." "You questioned the assumption that meaning must be stable," she continued. "You suggested that translation requires emotional risk, that the translator is altered by the act." Kai's smile faded. "That paper got me barred from 3 institutions. It made you visible to us," she said. "We cannot afford translators who remain unchanged." He rubbed his temples. "You're telling me my career implosion was a recruitment signal?" "In a way," she said. "I am sorry." "That's okay," he replied. "I always suspected I peaked at humiliation." She watched him closely, then said, "You joke when you are afraid." "Incorrect," Kai said. "I joke when I'm breathing." Silence settled again, not awkward this time, but thoughtful. Aelith moved toward the window, peering out at the city lights with curiosity. "Your world hums," she said. "It is very loud even when quiet." "That's anxiety," Kai said. "We export it." She turned back to him. "If you help us, you will have to leave this place." "That was already on my to-do list," he said. "I just assumed it would involve a bus." He pulled up a star map, not of known space but of dimensional overlap zones, the kind dismissed as theoretical until someone inconvenient proved them real. Aelith's gaze sharpened. "You recognize the boundary," she said. "I argued it existed," Kai replied. "People called it romantic nonsense." She smiled. It was brief, surprised, and unmistakably real. "Then perhaps this will be less difficult than I feared." "Don't get optimistic," he said. "That's how the universe hears you." She considered that. "Your humor is strange." "Thank you, it's trauma-based." He stood and paced, thinking aloud. Ancient temples, nonlinear syntax, planetary scale failure. You're not asking me to translate words. You're asking me to negotiate with a system that thinks. Yes, Aelith said, and time behaves differently near it. Of course it does, he muttered. Time always gets weird when stakes rise. She hesitated, then added, there is something else. There always is. You may not return as you are. Kai stopped pacing. He looked at her, really looked this time at the seriousness beneath her careful calm. That's not a deal-breaker, he said quietly. That's a Tuesday. Another pause, then she asked, will you help us? Kai glanced at the screens, at the languages no one wanted, at the life he'd been living because it was easier than hoping. He let out a slow breath. I don't know yet, he said, but I do know this. If your world is ending because someone wrote bad instructions and no one bothered to ask what they meant, then yeah, I want to see that. Aelith inclined her head. Then we will wait. Kai raised an eyebrow. You traveled across dimensions to wait in my apartment. Yes. He gestured around at the mess. Bold choice. She looked at the laundry pile thoughtfully. I am already familiar with its dangers. Kai laughed, and for the first time in a long while, the future didn't feel entirely like a closed door. Kai discovered that interdimensional travel did not care about dignity. The transition began with a sound like reality clearing its throat. Then the room folded, not inward or outward, but elsewhere, and Kai's stomach immediately filed a formal complaint. He had just enough time to say, I swear if I die like this, before gravity became optional, and his sense of direction resigned on principle. When the universe settled again, Kai was on his hands and knees, breathing hard, convinced his organs had been alphabetized incorrectly. I warned you, Aelith said nearby. You warned me about asterisk existential alteration, he gasped. You did not warn me about my soul attempting to exit through my ears. That is temporary. Everything is temporary, Kai muttered. That's the problem. He pushed himself upright and froze. The ground beneath him wasn't ground so much as agreement, solid because everyone involved believed it should be. The air vibrated faintly like a thought held too long. Somewhere distant, light bent in ways his eyes could track but not explain. Aelith stood easily, unaffected, watching him with something dangerously close to amusement. You adapted faster than expected. I once spent 6 months learning a language that only existed on Tuesdays, Kai said. My standards for normal died years ago. She gestured ahead. The first temple is close. We will not linger. Because of the collapsing into a black hole thing, Kai said. Yes. Good, hate to miss that. They walked, or rather, they progressed. Space behaved politely as long as neither of them questioned it too loudly. Kai focused on breathing, then on movement, then on not asking what would happen if he tripped. The temple did not announce itself. It simply became relevant. One moment there was open terrain. The next, Kai was aware that if he took 3 more steps, he would be inside something ancient and listening. He slowed. This place, he said carefully, is paying attention to me. Yes, Aelith said, it always does. That's unsettling. You say that as if it is unusual. They crossed the threshold together. The interior did not feel enclosed. It felt engaged. Symbols shifted along the surfaces, not glowing, not carved, but choosing where to be. Kai felt a pressure behind his eyes like a question forming. He swallowed. Okay, no pressure. Just an entire civilization's last hope watching to see if I blink. Aelith moved closer, instinctively, as if proximity might stabilize him. What do you hear? It's not sound, Kai said. It's intent, like grammar with opinions. He reached out. The moment his fingers brushed the surface, the symbols rearranged. Not randomly, responsively. Aelith inhaled sharply. They recognize you. Yeah, Kai said softly. I wish they wouldn't. Patterns cascaded. Meaning layered itself, recursive and patient. Kai's mind slid into old habits, the dangerous ones, where translation stopped being work and became participation. He laughed once quietly. You know what this is? What? Aelith asked. A user manual, he said, written by someone who assumed the reader already understood the universe. That is accurate. He stepped back, shaking his head. They encoded failure protocols into metaphor. That's why no one could read it. You don't translate this. You negotiate with it. Aelith studied him, eyes bright. Can you do that? I don't know yet, he said, but it's trying very hard to make me care. As if offended, the symbols shifted again, tightening, focusing. Kai winced. Okay, I care, don't be dramatic. Is it responding to your emotions? Aelith asked. Everything does, Kai replied. Most just lie about it. Time wavered. Kai felt it not passing, not stopping, but looping back on itself, checking for consistency. His head swam. How long have we been here? He asked. Aelith hesitated. Outside, very little. Inside. She did not answer immediately. That told him enough. Kai exhaled. We're going to have to be careful. Yes, she said. Careful is preferable. He glanced at her, at the steady presence anchoring him, while the universe tried to read him like a book it didn't fully trust. You brought me here because I'm reckless. I brought you here because you listen, she said. Recklessness was a known risk. He smiled weakly. Good to feel seen. The temple shifted again, opening deeper pathways, layers of meaning unfurling like invitations that might also be traps. Kai straightened, focus sharpening despite the strain. Well, he said, if this thing wants a conversation, it picked the wrong insomniac. Aelith's lips curved just slightly. You joke again. Occupational hazard, he said, stepping forward. Let's see what your ancestors were so afraid to write down. And somewhere in the structure, something ancient paid closer attention. Time did not pass so much as reconsider itself. Kai noticed it first when his sense of hunger arrived before his sense of fatigue, which made no chronological sense and offended him on principle. He sat on a low ledge that hadn't existed until he needed somewhere to sit, rubbing his temples while the temple continued its quiet, insistent thinking around them. I'm going to guess, he said, that your people didn't include rest areas. Aelith handed him a small, translucent sphere. Consume this. Kai squinted at it. That's ominous. It is nourishment. It looks like a decorative marble. It tastes nothing like stone, she assured him. He sighed and bit into it. The flavor was confusing, warm, faintly sweet, like if comfort food had been designed by a committee that had never experienced comfort but understood the theory. Okay, he admitted, that's not terrible. Aelith seemed pleased. You adapt quickly. I complain efficiently, he corrected. It's different. They worked in intervals that only loosely resembled hours. Kai would engage with the shifting structures, follow a logic thread until it tangled, then retreat before the feedback began pressing too hard behind his eyes. Each time he returned, the temple responded faster, anticipating his approach like an eager conversationalist who didn't understand boundaries. This is not a language, he said at one point, half laughing, half exhausted. It's a personality disorder. It is a record of decisions, Aelith replied, compressed across generations. That explains the passive aggression. She did not understand that, but she smiled anyway. At some point, the temple adjusted itself so that the symbols clustered closer to Kai's height. He tried not to feel flattered. Don't do that, he muttered to the structure. I'm not your favorite. The symbols tightened, then relaxed as if offended. Aelith watched the exchange with something like awe. It is responding to tone. Great, Kai said. I've offended furniture before, but this is a first. The work forced proximity. They stood shoulder to shoulder more often than not, both focused on the same shifting fragments of meaning. Sometimes their hands brushed when reaching for the same pattern, and each time it happened, the temple reacted, subtle distortions rippling outward, as if the system itself noticed the contact. That's inconvenient, Kai said after the third occurrence. Aelith's ears flicked. You think it notices us? I think it notices everything asterisk, he said, which makes this deeply awkward. They learned quickly that humor helped. Not for the temple, it remained relentlessly sincere, but for themselves. When a translation loop collapsed into contradiction, Kai declared it a philosophical tantrum. When a pathway refused to open until Aelith adjusted her stance, she accused the structure of favoritism. "It prefers you," Kai said. "It is ancient," she replied. "It should know better." Time outside continued to misbehave. Aelith would pause occasionally, listening to something beyond the temple's awareness, then report that entire cycles had passed while Kai felt only minutes drain away. "That's not sustainable," he said. "My brain's going to notice eventually." "Yes," she said quietly, "that is a concern." He pretended not to hear the weight beneath her words, and focused instead on a particularly dense cluster of symbols that felt hesitant. "This section," he said, "they're not explaining something, they're avoiding it." Aelith stepped closer, close enough that he could feel the faint warmth she carried, grounding in a place that resisted grounding. "What are they hiding?" Kai swallowed. "I don't know yet, but it's big." The temple pulsed as if aware it had been noticed. Kai laughed softly. "Relax, we're not judging yet." Fatigue crept in sideways. Not exhaustion exactly, more like cognitive overstretch. Kai found himself leaning back against a surface that rearranged itself to support him. Aelith sat beside him, mirroring the posture without thinking. For a moment, neither spoke. "You're calmer here," Kai said eventually. "This place is dangerous," Aelith replied. "Calm is necessary." "No," he said, "I mean calmer than when you arrived, less alone." She considered that. "I am not used to sharing responsibility." "Trust me," Kai said, "it's overrated. But it beats carrying everything yourself." She glanced at him, expression unreadable. "You joke again." "Still breathing," he said. The temple shifted, deeper pathways opening like doors that hadn't expected company so soon. Kai felt the pull immediately, a low-frequency insistence that settled into his bones. "That's new," he murmured. Aelith followed his gaze. "It is inviting us further." "Or daring us," he said. "Hard to tell with ancient systems." She stood, offering a hand. After a brief hesitation, he took it. The contact was steady, grounding, and the temple reacted with a ripple that felt almost pleased. Kai snorted. "Oh no." "What?" she asked. "I think it ships us." She stared at him. "I do not know that word." "Good," he said. "Let's keep it that way." Together, they stepped forward, into deeper layers of thought and consequence, while time outside bent itself into increasingly creative shapes, and something old and vast adjusted its expectations. Kai realized the temple had stopped trying to impress him and had moved on to testing him. The shift was subtle at first. Patterns that once responded eagerly now hesitated, as if waiting to see whether he would notice the pause. When he did, they rearranged themselves with something that felt uncomfortably like satisfaction. "Oh no," Kai said. "You've reached the evaluation phase." Aelith looked up from a lattice that had been unfolding obediently for the last few cycles. "Is that bad?" "It's never good," he said. "Systems that evaluate usually expect answers they don't explain." The symbols compressed inward, forming a dense knot of logic that tugged at his attention. When Kai reached for it, the temple resisted, not blocking him but redirecting his focus elsewhere, like a conversationalist changing the subject too quickly. "That's new," he muttered. "You're dodging." Aelith stepped closer, lowering her voice. "What does that mean?" "It means we're close to something they didn't want approached directly," he said. Which is impressive, because ancient civilizations usually loved dramatic warnings. He pressed anyway. The feedback hit harder this time, not painful but disorienting, memories slipping out of sequence, thoughts echoing back a half-second too late. Kai staggered, catching himself against a surface that stiffened in response. Okay, boundary acknowledged." Aelith steadied him without hesitation. "You should rest." "I would love to," he said. "Unfortunately, I think the temple has opinions about that." As if offended, the symbols flared, then settled into a new configuration, one that felt heavier. Older, purposeful. Aelith inhaled sharply. "This is a core record." Kai nodded slowly. "Yeah, and it's not a history lesson." The meaning unfolded reluctantly, like a confession extracted under protest. The temple wasn't a solution. It was a containment framework. The logic spirals, the recursive syntax, the emotional responsiveness, all of it existed to stabilize something that should never have been stabilized. Kai laughed once hollow. They didn't fix the problem, they taught it manners. Aelith stared at the symbols, ears drawn back. The singularity was always inevitable, Kai finished. They just slowed it down by anchoring it to cognition, thought, awareness. Silence stretched, thick and brittle. That means, Aelith said carefully, the system requires a mind. Not just any mind, Kai replied. One capable of sustained translation. Someone who can keep negotiating meaning indefinitely. She turned to him. You. Someone like me, he corrected. I didn't say me. The temple pulsed, gently but insistently, like a throat being cleared. Kai snorted. Don't look at me like that. I'm not agreeing to anything. Aelith's gaze sharpened. You said this was a user manual. It is, Kai said. And it's very clear about the cost, just vague enough to be unethical. The tension pressed in, heavy enough that even humor struggled to find a foothold. Kai paced, rubbing his hands together, brain racing. Okay, he said finally. Worst case scenario, the translator becomes part of the system. Best case scenario, same thing but with better documentation. That is not acceptable, Aelith said sharply. Agreed, he said, which is why I'm not signing up. She folded her arms. Then why does it continue to respond to you? Kai stopped, looked at her. Because it doesn't care about consent, it cares about compatibility. The temple reacted, symbols tightening as if confirming the statement. Aelith shook her head. You were chosen. No, Kai said quietly, I was filtered. The distinction hung between them, sharp and unresolved. Time outside lurched. Aelith stiffened, listening. The gravitational distortion is accelerating. Of course it is, Kai said. Cosmic deadlines are very motivating. She faced him fully now. If there is no other way. There is always another way, Kai interrupted. It's just usually hidden behind something inconvenient. Like effort. Despite herself, Aelith let out a breath that might have been a laugh. You joke even now. It's either that or panic, he said, and panic never translated anything well. They returned to the symbols together, but the mood had shifted. Every response felt weighted now, every successful interpretation carrying an echo of consequence. When their hands brushed again, the temple reacted more strongly than before, the ripple deeper, almost attentive. Kai noticed, he pretended not to. Aelith noticed too, she did not pretend. This system responds to connection, she said softly. Yeah, Kai replied, that's what worries me. The temple unfolded a final fragment, one that felt less like information and more like expectation. Kai read it slowly, carefully, then laughed under his breath. What? Aelith asked. It says, he said, the willing mind endures longer. Her eyes darkened. Willing. Yeah, Kai said. They really leaned into that word. Silence fell again, heavier than before, but threaded now with something else. Doubt, trust, and the uncomfortable knowledge that the temple wasn't just waiting for an answer. It was waiting for a choice. The problem with discovering the price of salvation was that it never arrived alone. Kai sat very still while the temple rearranged itself into what he privately labeled its *serious configuration. The symbols no longer flowed or experimented. They locked into place, each one certain, each one unbearably patient. Well, he said, breaking the silence, that's ominous. Aelith didn't answer right away. She had gone quiet in a way that meant she was listening beyond the structure, beyond even the planet. When she finally spoke, her voice was lower. Time outside has accelerated again. Define accelerated. Years are slipping. Kai let out a slow breath. Great. I've always wanted to miss entire chunks of reality, very efficient. The temple responded to his tone with a mild tightening of patterns, like a polite reprimand. Oh, relax, he told it. If you wanted reverence, you should have come with better signage. Aelith glanced at him. It does not understand mockery. That's fine, Kai said. Mockery is for me. He leaned forward, focus narrowing, and let his mind slide back into the logic thread they had been circling for what felt like days and might have been weeks. The meaning was clearer now, too clear. The temple was no longer hinting, it was explaining, and explaining never ended well. It's not just containment, Kai said slowly, it's continuity. Aelith's hands tightened at her sides. Explain. The system doesn't stabilize the singularity through force, he said. It stabilizes it through interpretation, constant reinterpretation. The black hole exists in multiple potential states, and the temple, this whole framework, keeps choosing which one becomes real. She stared at him. By thinking. By someone thinking, Kai corrected, continuously. The implication settled between them, heavy and unavoidable. Aelith shook her head. Our scholars believe the temples were autonomous. They are, Kai said, in the way a question is autonomous once you've asked it. The symbols pulsed and a new strand of meaning surfaced, unmistakable now. Kai read it, twice. Then he laughed. It wasn't hysterical, it wasn't even loud. Just a soft, incredulous sound, like someone discovering the fine print after signing their soul away. Oh, he said, that's bold. Aelith stepped closer. What does it say? Kai looked up at her, really looked. At the tension she carried like a second spine, at the trust she hadn't realized she'd already given him. It says the translator must be bound to the system, he said. Not physically, cognitively, permanently. Silence. No, Aelith said immediately, that is not. It also says, Kai continued gently, that the binding grows more stable if the subject is already accustomed to fractured identity, temporal displacement, and professional disappointment. She stared at him. He smiled weakly. I feel very targeted. The temple pulsed again, almost sheepish. Aelith's voice sharpened. You will not do this. Good, Kai said, because I wasn't planning to. The symbols tightened. The pressure behind his eyes increased, not painful but insistent, like a migraine made of expectations. I don't consent, Kai told the structure. Just putting that out there. Aelith reached for him, grounding him again, and this time the contact sent a stronger ripple through the temple, deeper, more resonant. They both felt it. Kai froze. Oh. Aelith withdrew her hand as if burned. What? It noticed, he said quietly, us together. The meaning shifted, expanded. Kai swore under his breath. You have got to be kidding me. What now? Aelith demanded. He looked at her, equal parts awe and dread. It says the load can be distributed. Her eyes widened. Distributed how? Across connected minds, Kai said. Shared cognitive anchors, mutual interpretation. No, she said again, more forcefully this time. Absolutely not. Hey, Kai said quickly. I'm not proposing anything. I'm just translating the bad news. She turned away, pacing sharply. You would lose yourself. So would you, he said, which is why I'm not suggesting it. She stopped. You joke as if this is abstract. It's not, he said softly. That's why I'm joking. The temple hummed, almost hopeful. Kai glared at it. Stop that. Time lurched again. Aelith pressed a hand to her temple. The distortion is worsening. The singularity is impatient. Story of my life, Kai muttered. He took a breath, steadying himself. Look, we're missing something. Ancient systems always hide alternatives behind arrogance. They assume no one will look. Aelith turned back to him. And if there is no alternative? Kai met her gaze. Then we argue with the universe until it blinks. Despite everything, she let out a short, breathless laugh. You are impossible. Consistently, he said. They stood there, bound not by the temple yet, but by the knowledge of what it wanted and the quiet, terrifying understanding that it wasn't entirely wrong. Some solutions didn't ask if you would pay the price. They simply waited to see how long you could pretend you wouldn't. The argument did not begin loudly. It began carefully, which somehow made it worse. Kai was the first to break the silence, because silence had started leaning in ways he didn't trust. We're circling the same conclusion, he said, and the floor is getting thinner. Aelith did not look at him. She stood at the edge of a configuration that pulsed erratically now, the temple's composure fraying under the strain of accelerating time and gravitational insistence. "You are assuming the system is honest." "It's ancient," Kai replied. "Not honest, consistent. That does not make it right." "No," he said softly, "but it makes it predictable." She turned then sharply. "Predictable enough that you think you can sacrifice yourself without consequence." He blinked, wow, straight to the accusation. "You are preparing yourself," she said. "I can feel it. You have already accepted an outcome." Kai opened his mouth, closed it, then laughed under his breath. "I've accepted worse outcomes. This one at least comes with cosmic significance." "This is not a joke," she snapped. "I know," he said. "That's why I'm using jokes. They're structural supports." The temple pulsed, agitated as if offended by the raised voices. Time hiccuped again. Kai felt it in the way his thoughts briefly arrived out of order. Aelith noticed. "It is destabilizing faster." "Yeah," Kai said. "It's getting dramatic." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You will not disappear into this system." "I didn't say disappear," he said. "I said repurpose." "That is not better." "It is if it works." Her ears drew back, a clear sign now of anger she wasn't bothering to mask. "You were chosen because you are isolated, because no one would come looking." Kai flinched, low blow. "It is true," she said, "and you know it." He took a breath. "I also know that if I don't do something, your world collapses, and that feels worse than being forgotten." The words hung between them, sharp and exposed. "You think I would accept that price?" she asked. "I think," Kai said carefully, "that you came to me because you knew I might." Her eyes darkened. "You think I manipulated you?" "I think," he said, "that you hoped I'd volunteer so you wouldn't have to ask." Silence cracked. The temple reacted violently this time, patterns spasming, pathways folding in on themselves. Somewhere far beyond the structure, gravity roared. Aelith turned away, fists clenched. "You are wrong." "Then say it," Kai said. "Say you'd let your world die rather than let me try." She didn't answer. "That's what I thought," he murmured. The tension snapped. "You are arrogant," she said, spinning back toward him. "You assume meaning can be imposed, that you can out-argue a civilization's last act. And you assume," Kai shot back, "that guilt is better leadership than responsibility." The words landed harder than he intended. He winced. "That was accurate," she finished coldly. "And unforgivable." They stood there, both breathing too fast, the temple oscillating wildly in response to the emotional feedback. Then Kai felt it, a thread, faint but unmistakable. A logical seam he hadn't noticed before, hidden beneath the larger narrative. "Wait," he said suddenly. "Wait, there's something else." Aelith hesitated. "This is not the moment." "No," he said, eyes unfocusing as he followed the thread. "This is exactly the moment." The argument paused, suspended as Kai reached deeper, letting the temple's logic wash through him without resistance. The system responded eagerly, patterns reorganizing around his attention. "Oh," he breathed, "you sneaky, unethical genius structure." "What?" Aelith demanded. "There's a failsafe," he said, "partial, incomplete. Probably abandoned, because it offended their sense of narrative purity." She stared at him. "Speak clearly." "The binding doesn't have to be permanent," Kai said. "Not if the cognitive anchor is shared temporarily enough to reset the system, by time." Her heart hammered so loudly he could almost hear it. "Shared." "Yes," he said, "which is where you yell at me again." She did not yell, she went very still. "You are suggesting I do this with you." "I'm suggesting we cheat," Kai said, briefly, strategically, in a way that ancient civilizations hated. "That would risk us both." "Yes, you would bind me to the singularity." "Also yes." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You do not get to decide that for me." Kai met her gaze. "I know, that's why I didn't decide," I translated. Time lurched again, more violently now. The temple's structure screamed, not in sound but in urgency. Aelith closed her eyes. When she opened them, something had shifted. "You are infuriating," she said quietly. "I hear that a lot." "And reckless." Frequently. She stepped closer, close enough that the space between them felt charged, the temple responding instantly. If we do this, she said, and it fails. It'll be spectacular, Kai said. We'll be legends. That is not comforting. I'm bad at comforting, he admitted. I'm better at showing up. She searched his face, looking for hesitation, fear, deceit. She found all of them, and resolve beneath. You trust me, she said slowly. Yes, Kai replied, which is alarming, but here we are. The temple settled slightly, as if sensing alignment. Aelith exhaled, long and steady. Then we prepare. Kai let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. You're sure? No, she said, but trust is the only currency we have left. He smiled faintly. Finally, something I'm rich in. They turned together toward the heart of the system as time fractured more violently around them, knowing the choice they had made would change everything, if it didn't erase it first. The moment came without countdown, which Kai decided was consistent with everything else about the universe. The temple did not ask if they were ready. It adjusted. Kai felt the system align around them like an idea finally finding the right words. Thought layered over thought, intention threading through intention. The singularity pressed against the framework, not violently, but insistently, like gravity testing a promise. Well, Kai said, voice steady despite the way his perception was beginning to stretch. If this works, I'm adding co-saved a planet to my resume. Aelith's focus never wavered. If this works, she replied, I will make certain your disgrace is reclassified as foresight. That's all I ever wanted, he said. Professional vindication via cosmic catastrophe. They synchronized the way the temple required, not through ritual or command, but through alignment. Shared attention. Shared trust. The system responded immediately, logic pathways blooming as their minds interlocked at specific nodes. Kai felt it then, the black hole not as destruction but as question. A massive, unresolved inquiry pulling reality toward collapse because no one had answered it properly. Oh, he murmured, you're not angry. Aelith caught the shift in his tone. What is it? It's incomplete, he said. The failure wasn't arrogance, it was abandonment. Together they fed meaning into the system. Reinterpretation, reframing, relentless negotiation. The singularity stabilized, not frozen but contextualized. Time began to behave again, reluctantly at first, then with increasing cooperation. Kai laughed softly as the pressure eased. You know, for something that threatened to eat your planet, it's remarkably needy. Aelith almost smiled. The binding did not complete the way the temple had expected. It couldn't. The shared anchor disrupted the old assumptions, forcing the system into a new equilibrium. The load distributed, then dissipated, leaving behind a structure that could function without constant sacrifice. The temple paused. Then slowly it released them. Kai collapsed backward, laughing breathlessly. I think we just argued an ancient superstructure into compromise. Aelith knelt beside him, steadying him. You altered its fundamental premise. Yeah, he said. Turns out civilizations can be wrong. Outside, the gravitational distortion settled. The planet did not rejoice. It simply continued, which felt like the highest form of success. Time reasserted itself unevenly. Kai felt it immediately, the weight of Earth pulling at his awareness like an overdue bill. Aelith sensed it too. Your world is calling you back. Figures, he said, right when I get used to the local apocalypse. They stood together at the threshold the temple opened for him. The connection between them remained, not binding, not painful but persistent, like a shared frequency neither could quite tune out. You cannot stay, she said. I know, he replied, time's petty like that. She hesitated, then reached out, touching his hand. The temple did not react this time. It had learned. You changed, she said quietly. So did you, Kai answered. You trusted someone who jokes under pressure. That may be my greatest risk, she said. He grinned. Worth it. The transition back was gentler. Or maybe Kai had learned how to bend with it. He woke in his apartment at midnight, exactly where he'd left, except the silence felt different now. less hollow. The translation tablet blinked to life on its own, displaying symbols that no longer argued back. Weeks passed. Then months. Kai published again, not dramatic revelations but careful reframings. People listened this time. Institutions hesitated, then adapted. Sometimes, late at night, the lights would flicker, and he would feel a familiar pressure behind his eyes, not pain, just presence. He would speak into the quiet, still holding together. And somewhere across dimensions, Aelith would answer, not in words but in warmth, in shared understanding, in the quiet humor of survival. Kai smiled more now. He slept better. He still joked when afraid, but he no longer mistook isolation for safety. The universe hadn't become kinder, but it had become negotiable, and that, he had learned, was enough.